how violence and insecurity are impacting Africa's youth and what the young can do to fight back. A look back at the medical milestones of 2015. And for the first time ever, the Beatles are available for streaming. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, we begin tonight's broadcast in the Middle East, where officials in Saudi Arabia say an early morning fire at a southwestern hospital has killed 25 people and injured 107 others. Authorities in the port city of Jazan say the blaze is now under control. The Saudi Civil Defense Agency says the fire started in the intensive care unit and the maternity ward. The cause of the fire is being investigated. To Africa, a former senior Burundi military officer is launching a new force to oppose President Pierre Nkurunziza, whose re-election for a third term this year plunged the nation into chaos. Edward Nshirimana, who quit the army this year, has named the new group Forebu, an acronym for Force Républicaine du Burundi. The formation of Foreb is the latest challenge to Nkurunziza's rule by a military officer following a coup attempt by a group of generals in May. It will further stoke worries that violence in Burundi could still turn into full-blown conflict and raise alarm about unity in the army, which was a rebuild after Burundi's civil war ended in 2005. The army now includes a mix of one-time rebel fighters and professional troops that experts say could fragment eventually. Now to the United Nations, where the entire Security Council is backing the new Libyan unity government. The Council also is urging the UN to push for full implementation of the deal.
We welcome the process now underway to move to the formation of that government of national accord in the coming weeks, and we ask the UN Secretary-General's Special Representative to continue his efforts to drive forward progress to this end.
The British-sponsored resolution called on the new Libyan President's Council to follow through on plans to form a new government within 30 days, while also making arrangements for its own security.
Ne nous leurrons pas.
Let us not harbor any illusion. The new authority will very quickly be put to test by all those who wish to undermine the process, and to these spoilers, we would like to say that now is the time to support this positive development, but if they continue to obstruct progress, our Council will very quickly have to take appropriate action.
Libya's UN ambassador Ibrahim Dabashi wants the UN to relax its arms embargo against Libya so his country can defend itself against Islamic State without the need for Western-backed airstrikes. Libya has been in chaos and political limbo since longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi was toppled and killed in 2011. Well, Burkina Faso has issued an arrest warrant for ousted leader Blaise Compaoré in connection with the nearly 30-year-old murder of former President Thomas Sankara. The charges against Compaoré mark a major step in the case. Meanwhile, former Prime Minister and President-elect Roch Marc Kabore is set to assume power on December the 29th. Burkina Faso's President Thomas Sankara, seen here in file footage, was killed in 1987, the year a coup brought Blaise Compaoré to power. Nearly 30 years on, an international warrant has been issued for Compaoré's arrest in connection with his death. An autopsy on a body believed to be Sankara's earlier this year showed it was riddled with bullets. That's adding weight to suggestions it was executed in the coup all those years ago. At least 10 others have been charged in connection with his death. Compaoré was driven from power in October 2014 in an angry backlash against his attempts to extend his 27-year rule. He fled to neighboring Ivory Coast, where he is now thought to be based. Now, for more insight into the death and legacy of Thomas Sankara, I am joined by political analyst Nyaka Lagoke. Nyaka, welcome back to Africa 54.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, first, what was your reaction to this report that now confirms Sankara was killed and actually was shot dead?
I was happy, and that's something we've been waiting for 28 years, and it shows that Dr. King was right when he said that the arc of the universe is long, but it always bends towards justice. So we're happy to hear that Blaise Compaoré is going to be prosecuted, and then he has to respond for the crime of Thomas Sankara, for the assassination.
You know, one of the things that, of course, was an obstruction was that Compaoré was in power for all that time. And so was he trying to manipulate really what happened and make it look like Sankara died of some natural cause?
Yeah, of course. You know, they issued a death certificate on which it was written that Sankara died of natural cause or natural death. Of course, for all those 27 years, he did everything possible using his oppressive and repressive power and his network within Burkina and outside Burkina, to stop any justice, for Thomas Sankara. So now that he's not in power, then he's weak and he doesn't have the support that he had when he was in power. Then things can go smoothly, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing today.
Yes. Thomas Sankara himself came to power through a coup. He was only 33 years old. What makes him so special that you take so much interest in him?
Yeah, Thomas Sankara was very special. I remember when I was in high school, and we were happy because we're tired, of those corrupt leaders who cannot meet the needs of the people. And he came, he was different, a man of integrity. He was sincere, and he was talking and walking the talk. And he was empowering his people. For all those things, he became not only a hero for Burkina Faso, but a hero for the entire continent.
This is a guy who said that women, actually appointed women to government offices, said women should stay in school even if they get pregnant.
Yeah, not only that. Thomas Sankara, if people have the opportunity to go and study him, you will see that the global warming issue they're talking about today, environmental issues, and all those issues, Thomas Sankara had touched all of them.
Because he ordered his people actually to plant trees all across the country.
He was a visionary.
But we know that it was also anti-imperialism. He's a person who nationalized the wealth of the country. The question is, could there have been some external hand in the assassination of Thomas Sankara?
Yeah, of course. I'm not going to directly answer that question here in this studio. Yes, of course. And there was the former president of Ivory Coast. We heard that he was involved because guess what? Compaoré's wife is Ivorian. She was a protégée of Félix Houphouët-Boigny. People also mentioned Gaddafi's name, and of course there were some foreign powers that had interest in his assassination. And then just to mention a few of them, people talk about France.
Now, do you think there is something that the people of Burkina Faso can learn or could learn from having lost a man like Sankara? And can they ever recover and perhaps utilize some of his programs to take the country forward?
During the campaign, we saw Diabré and Kaboré, the president-elect. All of them were claiming Thomas Sankara, so that you can imagine. And now the people who organized the struggle, they use the spirit and the energy of Thomas Sankara, and today they want to use his values and then his understanding of the development of the country today in order to try and foster a new chapter. But quickly, I'm happy also because Blaise Compaoré is the one who brought the war to Ivory Coast, and then now he's there in Ivory Coast. And then Mr. Ouattara, who brought Gbagbo to the ICC, and Mr. Ouattara, who put Gbagbo's wife in prison. Today, he has to respond and bring and send Blaise to Burkina so that he can respond for his crimes. Yeah. Because the last sentence, the struggle for justice cannot be segregated.
All right, thank you. Well, thanks a lot, Nyaka, and our thanks to political analyst Nyaka Lagoke. Well, the Center for Security and Strategic Studies in Washington, D.C. recently held a discussion on some of the ways in security and violent movements affect African youth and youth-led solutions to these African challenges. Viewers Jackson Vunganya has the report.
Africa is known as the youngest continent. Over 60% of its population is under the age of 25. Such a young population can either be an advantage or a liability in terms of economic and political development. The Center for Security and Strategic Studies recently held a panel discussion examining what experts see as the impact of Africa's youth dividend and the possibilities of what can be gained as many of these countries fight their way to stable political systems and a middle-income status. The panel explored the ways in which insecurity and violent movements affect African youths, but most importantly, what they see as youth-led solutions to what are essentially African challenges. Patrick van der Laag is the National Director of the Student United for Reconstruction and Education in Liberia. He started his organization right after the civil war in his country.
We have been involved into the promotion of peace and unity among young people, leading them into developmental youth initiative, like a true civic education, reminding them that war is not an option, so that the mistakes that were made yesterday by our past generation cannot be repeated by my generation. I think we are more refined, and we need to demonstrate to the world that we are today's leader and no longer future leader.
Mark Summers is the author of the new book, The Outcast Majority, War, Development and Youth in Africa. He says that youth are essentially dominant players in whatever takes place on the continent. However, it is important for people to note that most young people resist the pressure to join violent movements, even though the majority often feel a sense of alienation from what they see as elite-driven political and economic systems.
Everything that goes on is youth are involved. The youth were involved dominating peace building as well as the violent activities. But I should point out that even in situations where youth can really get involved, have a chance to get involved in violence or in war, most resist. And so the big question we should be asking is, why are most youth so peaceful?
The panelists agree that failure by governments across the continent to address some of the unique challenges faced by the youth has created a situation where they have to turn to what would otherwise be unconventional means of survival. Matthew Breman is the Africa Regional Director for International Youth Foundation. He says that there is a risk in the failure by governments to take advantage of this youth dividend.
From our vantage point, how do you use positive youth development and young people as this demographic dividend, as opposed to some of the stigmas attached to young people that they're inexperienced, they can't do this, they can't do that, they have to wait their turn.
Van der Laag agrees. He says that such failure opens doors to elements in society that often exploit many of these young people.
Many of the young people are unemployed, and when young people are not employed, as it is said in Africa, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. People can easily manipulate them.
But Ritu Sharma, the author of the book Teach a Woman to Fish, says that she is more interested in looking at why so many of the youth in Africa, even as they are faced with high levels of poverty and inequality, are able to resist engaging in violent activity.
99% plus of young people in the world are nonviolent and not interested in violence. And we want to look at some of the positive outliers. So the question for me is not, why are youth so violent? The question is, why are so many youth nonviolent, given the challenges that they face, particularly in Africa?
So the question really is, how do African countries use this demographic dividend to achieve the same progress that developed countries have had by going through what is known as a demographic transition, the kind of transition where largely rural societies transition to urban industrial societies? For Voice of America, I'm Jackson Vunganyi.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Well, coming up, the remarkable medical breakthroughs of 2015. Stay with us.
Science and technology, here's what's new.
A smartphone, a really smartphone that will be able to diagnose malaria. Engineers at Texas A&M University are developing a device that attaches to a smartphone and converts it into a sophisticated microscope. Here's Texas A&M's Richard Coate.
The way they diagnose malaria now is with a microscope, but it's a big benchtop microscope, and you have to have the facilities for that scope. So basically what we're taking is that gold standard and making it into a portable device.
The device uses polarized light on a blood sample to detect malaria parasites, and the diagnosis takes just minutes using a phone app. Some 214 million people got malaria in 2015, killing over 400,000, most of those in sub-Saharan Africa. The cost of the device will be under $50, according to the developers. For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Grossans.
Well, it's time for Health Report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with a look at tuberculosis. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Vincent. The White House released a comprehensive plan that identifies critical actions to be taken by key federal departments and agencies to combat the global rise of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, MDR-TB. Each year, more than 9.5 million people develop active TB, and approximately 480,000 people develop MDR-TB. However, fewer than 20% of individuals with MDR-TB receive the drugs they need to combat the disease, and less than half of them are cured. The National Action Plan for Combating Multi-Drug-Resistant Tuberculosis identifies a set of targeted interventions that address the core domestic and global challenges posed by MDR-TB and extensively drug-resistant TB. It is organized around three goals. First, strengthen domestic capacity. Second, improve international capacity and collaboration. And finally, accelerate basic and applied research and development. The UN Special Envoy on Tuberculosis, Eric Goosbein, in a statement has applauded the plan and says, quote, "We must ensure that this important plan is followed up with the necessary resources from the administration and Congress to match actions with words. Without the resources, it becomes a plan lost on a shelf instead of a vehicle for action." December 28th marks the 2-year anniversary of the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. In 2015, a vaccine against the dreaded disease proved successful. There have been other successes against diseases like HIV, AIDS, and polio, as well as concerns about the increasing risk of antibiotic resistance. VOA's Carol Pearson looks at 2015 and some remarkable progress in medicine.
Ebola claimed more than 3,000 lives in 2015. Potential vaccines were fast-tracked, and clinical trials had started in West Africa early in the year. Then in July came news about a vaccine trial in Guinea, overseen by the Norwegian Institute of Public Health.
Based on the number of individuals and cases we see, there is 100% protection in those vaccinated.
There was also news during the year about progress in the fight against another lethal virus, HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. Just before World AIDS Day, the UN said nearly 16 million people are now on HIV treatment, that new infections have fallen by 35% since 2000, and that AIDS-related deaths have fallen by 42% since the peak in 2004.
If you look at the trajectory of the epidemic, we are on a course towards ending it in the sense of as we know it, because we've always known it as going up, now it's flattening off, and now it's going to start to go down.
2015 also saw a huge advance in ridding the world of polio. At one time, the polio virus circulated in 125 countries. In September, the World Health Organization removed Nigeria from the list of polio endemic countries. Now there are only two, Afghanistan and Pakistan.
That's the only place in the whole world where wild poliovirus still lives. And if we can knock it out there, we're finished with wild poliovirus.
Despite the successes, there are concerns. The World Health Organization warned that we're heading towards a post-antibiotics era, one in which common infections will once again kill because of resistance to medication.
Health officials are also concerned about drug-resistant tuberculosis and malaria. The WHO has called for an intensified campaign in 2016 to end the global TB epidemic. Challenges also lie ahead in getting the polio vaccine to Afghan children in areas held by Islamic militants, and to develop treatments and vaccines against newly emerging infectious diseases. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
That's our Africa Health Report for today. Vincent?
Well, Lino, thanks a lot. Be sure to watch Lino Mudu's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Will the Beatles break the internet? Good news for fans of the Fab Four this Christmas Eve. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Big news for Beatles fans. At 12:01 a.m. local time on Christmas Eve around the world, the Beatles' music became available for streaming from numerous outlets. Services that are carrying the Fab Four's musical catalog include Apple Music, Deezer, Google Play, Microsoft Groove, Napster, Rhapsody, and Amazon Prime Music, as well as Slacker Radio, Spotify, and Tidal. The 17 Beatles albums span from With the Beatles and A Hard Day's Night to Abbey's Road and Let It Be, plus subsequent greatest hits collections. And that is what is trending today. Well, our next story is fascinating. Benjamin Ola Akande came to the United States 36 years ago from Nigeria. Today, he is the newest president of Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, and the first African to lead the liberal arts college. Akande says he's honored, and this is a dream come true for him. He recently sat down with VOA's Mariama Diallo in this exclusive interview.
Well, thank you, Dr. Akande, for being here, and I'm going to start by congratulating you on your new appointment.
It's a pleasure. I'm honored to get a chance to be interviewed at a station that I grew up listening to way back in the day, and I'm really excited to be here this morning. Westminster College is a very unique place. It is an institution that over time has been very focused on developing leaders. And their focus on developing leaders has not just been American leaders, but also global leaders. Over 80 international students represented among our population, 80 countries particularly. And I think that was an attraction to me. And then secondly, it's an institution that has a significant record of accomplishments. 96% of our students are placed in jobs or graduate school within 6 months of graduation. I'm big on results, and I think that was also very, very, very attractive to me. And then thirdly, history. Westminster College is the place that Winston Churchill, almost 70 years ago, gave the Iron Curtain speech that in essence changed the dynamics of World War II and the world following that period of time. For a small college to have such a huge stage, and after Winston, Gorbachev delivered a major speech while he was still in power, in which he projected what the future of the Soviet Union will look like. We've had Ronald Reagan there, we've had distinguished world leaders, Margaret Thatcher, So it is a place that welcomes change.
I was going to touch on the 70th anniversary of Churchill's speech. I think that's being celebrated next year, right, in 2016.
It is.
You talk about it being very multicultural today. Just going back, it used to be a predominantly white college.
Absolutely.
How did that change?
Well, like most colleges in the United States, at some point, there's transformation. It changed more so because the university found value in it. They found value in the fact that in order to enrich the experience of our students, you have to bring students from different parts of the world with different perspective, with different backgrounds, and that in itself creates a dynamic that aligns with what we call liberal arts education, which is sort of giving everybody bits and pieces of touch in history and literature and sciences, and developing a human being to be an effective leader.
We are getting ready, the U.S., to hold elections soon. A lot of the issues are very divisive, from gun control to climate change to religion. How do you cultivate that idea of inclusiveness? You know, how do you cultivate that in the college itself?
One of the reasons why I came to this country was that I was seeking a place where I could be a member of that community. And America afforded me that opportunity, and it's been a great one. But more importantly, I wanted them to know that inclusive excellence is critical to us moving forward. And what it means is this, that we may disagree with each other, but we do so respectfully. And in fact, I use the term disagreement is not disrespect. And I said, but we have to be responsible for our actions. And we have to make sure that we don't offend, we don't demean or degrade individuals because they don't look like us, because they don't have the same value systems as us, and that the part of education process is that openness to new ideas and perspective.
Usually just agree to disagree.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And so when you look at the current debate going on in the U.S., it is a debate. And at some point, that debate will be validated by Americans at the polls.
Well, let me touch on one more thing when we talk about American politics very quickly to follow up on my previous question about one Republican candidate recently comments about banning Muslims from coming to the United States. I mean, you are from Nigeria originally, and half of that country is Muslim. So what do you make of comments like that? And how do you discuss it with students?
Well, it is a perspective of one individual. And I believe that Donald Trump does not speak for America, the totality of this country. And again, we have to be able to give him an opportunity to be able to say his mind, but at the same time, offer him an alternative option to that. I think what we'll find as we move forward is this is going to create a debate, a conversation among Americans as to what the value system for this country is. And that indeed, if we say that we're a place that welcomes immigrants from all over the place, and that those immigrants formulate the totality of what is the uniqueness of America, if that's what got us here, what's going to get us into the future? Well, I would say doing what got us here has worked, that sense of embracing people from different places. And so when you make a statement that the Muslims are not welcome here, I think it's not a statement that characterizes the very essence of what America is all about.
That's our show. Have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words.
At the presidential palace in Dakar, Senegal, U.S. President Barack Obama was welcomed by Senegalese President Macky Sall. Listen for the word that means two sides.
Bilateral talks covered a range of issues, from U.S. support for Senegal's democracy and infrastructure to joint security.
The word bilateral means having two sides. So bilateral talks are when the leaders of two countries discuss issues of joint concern.
Bilateral treaties are between two nations, and bilateral agreements can cover trade or other matters.
Now, when you hear the word bilateral, your English will be good enough to know what this news word means.